What you are looking at is the calculate.cfc file. So this is a ColdFusion component called calculate. It has two methods within the component itself. The first is add, the second is subtract. Very simple examples of a very important concept. So now that I have these two functions created, what is it I do with these functions? And what I can do is call these methods, passing in some information. But the way I call these methods is a little bit different than calling a regular method sitting on the page or calling it from an include file. If it's a component file, I need different syntax for working with these methods. And that's the piece I wanted to demonstrate within this particular lesson. So I have a file called example static, and it's a .cfm file. It doesn't have a header or footer on the page, but it has my basic HTML information. What I want to do within this page is use the add method within the calculate CFC file. And I'm going to output the results of that onto this page. So in order to do that, what I need to do is invoke a method of this component. And I use the word invoke because cf_invoke is how you work with it. And what I'm going to do is tell ColdFusion which component I want to invoke. And as soon as I've done that, this is a listing of all of the components within the ColdFusion server. So if I scroll down here, notice it's going back to the web root. So if it's a component within a particular web root folder, and ours is Power Workshop, that's where I want to go. So this powerworkshop.calculate is the component I want to invoke, so I will double click it. Now notice it's putting the path to the root folder within this file. Now what method is it I want to invoke within this particular CFC? Because usually they contain multiple, I need to specify. And the method I'm going to invoke is called add. My next piece is I'm going to set the return variable. So this is going to become the name of the variable that gets returned. And I'll name it addition, just so there's no confusion about what it is I'm referencing. The other piece I need to pass in are the arguments for that particular method. And one is arg1, and let's add 178 as argument 1, and arg2. These were predefined within my calculate method. Let's do 398. What I just told ColdFusion is to go to the Power Workshop folder. Within that folder, there's a CFC called calculate. Within that CFC, there's a method called add. When the information is returned to me, this is what it's going to be named, and this is the data that gets passed in. Now, argument 1 and argument 2 right now are hard-coded values, but ColdFusion would process those out if I put in other variable names for that. And then how do I output the information returned from that particular method? I will say let's do add method of the calculate CFC returned a value of, and then I just use addition, what I plugged in right up above here, telling ColdFusion the results of that method are going to be named this. Now this particular line does need to go inside a CF output, and that is the little monitor up here. So if I select it and click the monitor, ColdFusion adds, or CF Builder in this instance, adds the ColdFusion tag of CF output. Let's put it into Firefox and see what happens, and there's the results. So you invoke a method in that manner. And I'll copy that and do the same thing down here. This time I'm going to subtract. So I will use the subtract method. And now you can see why it's valuable to have access to the documentation for that CFC. And this will say the subtract method returned a value of, and this one was named diff. Actually, let's call it subtract because we can name it anything. Now, it's usually not a great idea to have these two the exact same name. So let me modify that just slightly so there's no confusion whatsoever on your side, so this makes sense and you can see the distinction. Okay, so I can run this. I'll pop it into Firefox, and there it is. Minus 220 or 576. Now when we do this, we should probably just double check the addition. So I didn't exactly make it simple here, but yes, that is 576. So that is how you invoke a method of a component. This is a static component. It doesn't have any properties, so we can use the cf_invoke tag to work with those methods within our component. So that is how you invoke a static component within ColdFusion.